Welcome to Human Powered, the podcast about creating a high-performing agency or consultancy business. And today I have Ranzie Anthony, co-founder and CEO of Athlon. Ranzie, hello.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on. Chuffed to be here.
Well, lovely to have you here. So, Ranzie, you co-founded Athlon 14 years ago. It's a global design and technology company. You've got a team of about 100 people across 4 different continents. So given all of that, tell me, how do you define high performing in the context of Athlon?
High performing for us isn't just about output, i.e., the process that people are going through, but it's about outcomes. And if we reflect on that period of time, particularly in design and technology, our industry's really changed. So for a lot of what we look for from our individuals is that ability and that interest in embracing change, which is hard because people don't necessarily like it. So yes, we look at, the quality of our work and the impact that we deliver for clients, and we have client satisfaction metrics and agency revenue targets and things like that. But ultimately, I think high performance in our world is really those with the ability and interest to adapt and to embrace change, particularly when it's hard, and even if you look at now and today and the impact of AI and what that's going to do, for everything, that's another disruptor, which means that we have to change. And that's what we look for, in terms of high performing individuals on our teams.
Tell me a bit more about that ability to embrace change.
If I take the story of our director of delivery, so one of the great things is we do have people who've been in the business a very long time. So Katie started with us as a junior production exec almost 10 years ago. So as green as you like, but she's really grown with our agency and has seen us change through multiple iterations, and has been part of that change and embraced that change. Going from project manager to our most senior PM to a project director working across a range of accounts. And now she sits on our senior leadership team and she heads up delivery. And, she's loved by both clients and peers, within the organizations. That's a brilliant example of somebody who's really been able to evolve and adapt and embrace change. And I think that's she's a benchmark example of high performance.
The world keeps changing. And when you're working within one business, you've got to make sure that you're still able to keep up with those changes.
Absolutely. And I think that almost if you think about businesses go through iterations, I don't know what version of Athlon we're on now, but it certainly isn't the same one that we started all those years ago. So I think that as much as it's the same organization, I like to think of us kind of releasing new versions of ourselves, because that's the only way that you can adapt and continue to compete, in my opinion.
So you've talked about a couple of things there in terms of high performing. You talked about that ability to embrace change. And you also mentioned about focusing on outcomes rather than just outputs. This is all very well and good to say in theory. How do you apply that in practice?
So one of the things that we really started to focus on over the last couple of years is values, and how do we embed those values into ourselves as an organization. So we have 5 key values, whether that's being brave, taking ownership. We're a remote first business. And as a result of that, we really do need people to be able to and embrace working autonomously, but also working as part of a team. So effectively, we have a set of values and we try to embed those in terms of how we go about doing what we do. Be that we have things like player of the quarter, whereby, for example, Dan, one of our tech leads, always wanted to learn how to fly. So he won flying lessons. And this is an award which is voted on by your peers. And we try and link it to demonstrating that you've embraced the values that we try to adopt as a team. I was thinking even our HR platform has a little hashtag with our values in it. So when people do our shout out, because we encourage people to shout out those who've done something really cool during the week, we go, massive thanks to, Harrison for managing to get that deployment out when we were right up against it. Brilliant example of taking ownership. Thanks again, mate. So we try and live the values and really embed those in our culture.
Dan's prize sounds amazing. What did he do to win player of the quarter and get that?
So in that particular case, we were going through a period whereby we are doing lots of technical deployments. And what we do is hard. The type of work that we take on is complex, UX-driven, large web platforms or product applications. Dan in particular, as one of our senior devs, was spanning a whole range of products. And he was just really up against it, going the extra mile. And again, what's brilliant about it is it's not the leadership saying, hey, you've done great. It's voted by your peers. So it's the people who are in the trenches with you day to day, collectively saying, guys, we all recognize that that our colleague here has gone that extra mile. So that's what's really nice about it. But I think, again, that's another good illustration of how that fosters community and a shared sense of values.
So you've got your key values and you're trying to embed them in everything that you're doing. You've got your shout outs, you've got your kind of nominations for the player of the quarter. What else do you do to embed those values?
So we do things like we do get together. So, I mean, as much as a remote first business, there's a whole range of different things that we do to try and keep everybody motivated and foster a sense of togetherness. So, for example, every Monday we have our kickoff, but we meet up in person once a quarter. We've got people all over the world. So we different tips. So, for example, most recently, we had a team trip to Dubai. And that was amazing, whereby we all spent some time together. There's no business objective other than to build cultural bonds. So we did a desert trip where we all drove out and we sat in the middle of a desert having to try and do this treasure hunt. From what I remember, a couple of people were riding camels and then we had a meal out. But it was about actually just creating really strong, enduring memories so that whilst we can't be together in person, we're actually together. We're still managing to form that spirit as a team. We also do things like weekly get-togethers when we need to for clients. We have a fireside monthly whereby I talk about the business performance and how we're doing and where we're trying to go. Pre-pandemic, we used to do things like global gatherings where we all used to ship off to Bulgaria, which was amazing. So those are some of the things that we do to try and foster a sense of togetherness. And again, other ways to live and embed those values.
You've got this set of values that bind everything together and bind everyone together. And then you do these activities to bring the team together and to create those strong, enduring memories.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because when you're up against it and, you're up against a deadline and you're having to go the extra mile or project's not going quite the way you want it or a client's being challenging and you really need to rely on your colleagues and your peers, it's in those moments that culture really matters. And it will pay dividends in those moments because it will be at that point where people turn around and kind of go, oh, well, you know what? I can see that Harrison is up against it. I'm happy to jump on this just to get it over the line because I don't want him stressed out by this. So I think that's where the investment in culture pays off. And that's why we really do try and double down and, create an environment where people, care for their colleagues and they really want to go the extra mile.
I really like what you're saying because agency life is hard. You've got a lot of deadlines. You've got loads of curveballs continually coming in. And for you to create that high-performing business and that high-performing team, you've identified we've got to double down on culture. We have to invest the time, we have to invest the effort, and we have to do practical things to make sure that when the chips are down, the team rally around together.
100%. And I learned that at my first agency I ever worked at. So way back when I graduated as a designer, I worked at an agency called Deep End, which was basically one of those early stage digital agencies. They were brilliant. They formed an amazing culture. So I managed to witness firsthand the impact that could have, both in the work that was produced, but the spirit and the bonds that were created, many of which are individuals that 20 years later I still see and connect with in the industry. So yeah, it definitely is something which is key to who we are.
it's great that you had that awareness of what was going on, because often when you're a graduate and it's your first role, you just think this is normal.
Yeah, I think at that time, no one quite knew what was going on with digital. Like it was almost a bit like the Wild West, you know. People didn't quite know what to expect from websites. People didn't quite know what to expect from digital marketing. And you had a bunch of very young people out there just trying to create things and grow agencies off the back of it. I think that obviously it's a lot more sophisticated now, but some of the key principles of how those organizations operated and were able to drive success are still very, very relevant today.
Yeah, I guess as we talked about earlier, there's constant change and we have to adapt and move with the times. But those core principles around togetherness, they're timeless.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the ways that we were able to, as a team, adapt really seamlessly to operating remote. So our office used to be based in Oxford Circus, and I remember traveling into the office every day, and teams. But in the rapid change to the pandemic and having to shut everything down, we were able to literally pick up our laptops and just operate really efficiently and pretty seamlessly, because we were used to having our colleagues in different countries, and we were used to having to work slightly remotely, and we already had a culture whereby we had been meeting regularly with our colleagues, with our international colleagues. So I think that held us in good stead to be able to adapt quite quickly.
There's a lot of talk of getting back to the office nowadays. What's your take on that?
I can see the value in getting together in person when it makes sense, but I can't see the value in forcing people back into the office to do the very same thing that they could be doing at a desk at home. And I'm a big believer that I saw an ad by Spotify, which basically says we're going to continue working remote because our employees are not children. I mean, I think it's really important that technology has enabled us to live lives where people should be able to take their kids to school. They should be able to get home for the school run. They should be able to, take an hour out during the day if they're manage to get through everything, not at the cost of obviously finding ways to drive culture or training for young people. But I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. So for me, I believe in hybrid working. I believe in a remote first culture. And I think the well-being it creates for our team significantly outweighs the sense of everybody having to be in one location at a particular time during the day just so they can sit there and do a remote call with a colleague 2 desks away.
Well, it sounds like you're very much aiming to get the best of both worlds here. So first, giving people the flexibility and freedom to work in the way that works best for them, and then putting that effort in to define your values, to create the culture that you want, and then to do specific activities that you've talked about to get that sense of togetherness happening, even though you are all remote.
Absolutely. And I think that it's not easy, and you have to invest in it, and you have to make decisions. Like last year was not the best year for any agency. And, when we were looking at the cost of shipping everyone out to Dubai, we did pause for thought and say, well, hang on a sec. Does this still make sense given what Q3 is looking like? But yes, it does, because ultimately you're playing for the long term, and you're building a culture which is going to see you through and hopefully become one of the most valuable assets you've got. Whether it's retention, whether it's acquisition of new staff, whether it's kind of the quality of work and the passion that people put into it. So yeah, it's a no-brainer when you look at it from that perspective.
So Ranzie, it sounds like your setup is working generally well for you as a business. Why are other business leaders struggling to replicate this and demanding people come back in the office?
The cynic in me says property, maybe. Hey, we've got an office, we need to fill it. I hear the argument, in fairness, which says, well, look, the more junior members of the team do need to learn through osmosis of working closely with other people. But equally, I think you can replicate those things. And I think you can double down and have very meaningful interactions that you design to get teams together. I think you can have co-learning sessions. We still get together when we need to, because if it's going to accelerate brainstorming or accelerate solving a challenge. So we absolutely still get together, but we're just very intentional about how we spend our time when we get together so that we can establish that balance. So to be honest, I'm not clear why a lot of organizations are demanding that people come back to the office. I'm yet to hear a compelling argument as to why that needs to be, someone needs to be in the office 4 days a week.
So for anyone listening to this, if you're struggling with bringing your team together, creating that togetherness because everyone's remote and you feel like, oh, maybe I need to get everyone in the office, Ranzie, if you can bottom line this for those people listening, what are your maybe like concluding top 3 tips?
Okay, my top 3 tips would be, the first one is a leadership thing. I would say trust. You have to trust your team. You have to believe and have a culture where the leadership team trust that working remotely, people are going to do what they need to do, work with the interests of the company, best interests at heart. There will always be edge cases, but you have to have that trust, and that has to be from at a leadership level. And I think you've got to embrace that. The second thing I would say is reward positive behavior. So when we see individuals doing things that reflect the type of company that we want to be, we try and put a spotlight on it and we try and reward it. That's why we gave Dan flying lessons. That's why we'll give people spa days or away days or days off or whatever it is. If somebody does something great, reward it and call it out and let everybody see that, guys, this is what good looks like. Let's all try and be good. And the last thing I would say is do get together. Being remote shouldn't mean that you don't actually get together, but just be intentional. So, for example, we get together for cultural events for no other reason than to spend time together and to have a good time. So we might go to, if it's the UK team, we might go to a cottage for the weekend or just for a couple of days during the week, just to spend time together with no agenda that, you've got to be here, you've got to be working, you've got to be brainstorming. No, we're just here to do the cultural side of our organization. And I think those would be the 3 things for me. Leadership needs to trust trust in the team, reward positive behavior, get together intentionally for the sake of building culture.
One of the things that's quite interesting is that you're not only are you remote first, but you're so global across 5 countries in 4 continents. Tell me a bit about the challenges of having such a globally diverse team.
So it's less of a challenge now because I guess I wouldn't say we've cracked it. You've never cracked it, but I think the world is moving this way. So, for example, even this week, I've been working with our Australia-based team for a client which is based in Africa. And so we're doing a project for a Nairobi-based client using our Australian-based studio with a bit of a blended team from the UK. Equally, we've got the majority of our devs based in Bulgaria. We've got clients based in the US. So it's a real mixed bag. Time zone actually becomes more important than location because it's about finding those windows, those golden hours where you're all overlapping to be able to do the right thing. Sometimes it works in your favor. So, for example, in this recent project I'm working on with our Australia team being basically a couple of hours ahead, the client's always delighted because, oh, wow, how have you managed to do all of this work so quickly? Well, actually, it turns out they've been working while we've been sleeping and then we've picked it up and so it can work in your favor. But it took time and it requires tools and processes, and it wasn't always that case. It was more challenging pre-COVID and pre-clients being used to working with people in different locations. It was more challenging when you've got cultural differences and having to find new ways of working. It was more difficult when we had all of our engineers in one country and designers in the other, because, ultimately designers and engineers don't always see eye to eye. So that by no means would I say that it's been easy, but equally the tapestry of people and differences. And, I remember one of the things that we did, which was really cool, was Athlon MTV Cribs, whereby you got to see people's houses in different countries. One of our content leads is in South Africa, and right now it's really hot and it's the height of summer for those guys. Here in the UK, it's exactly the almost opposite. So whenever starting the call where she just turns her camera around and shows us the view outside is often quite hilarious. So, there's, again, it's that embracing difference, and it's that embracing different cultures, and it's trying to form a sense of, look, we're all here doing the same thing. And actually, I really enjoy the fact that our team's distributed in different countries, and we get a sense of what life is like in a different part of the world ahead of getting down to what we need to do for our clients.
So you've had a globally diverse team since almost the beginning, especially with Bulgaria and the UK. I'm guessing you've been on a bit of a learning curve over that time. Tell me a bit about perhaps some of the mistakes you made or some of the difficulties you had in the early days managing these differences in cultural nuances.
It really took about, I'd say, 4 to 5 years to really start working from the point at which we started. From my perspective, we were quite early in this. Like I said, you had language differences, cultural differences, designer to tech differences, time zone differences, process differences. I think that one of the early mistakes that we made and some of the frustrations came out of things like, say, the UK team trying to make commitments to the clients that our Bulgaria team, A, maybe didn't agree with, or B, just weren't set up to deliver. Or equally, maybe our Bulgaria team getting frustrated by promises made by designers and expectations. So when I think about the saying about how teams come together, forming, storming, norming, and performing, we absolutely went through that. And in those storming years was where, to be honest, we lost clients along the way as a result of it. There were times whereby we just couldn't get our teams to click in the way that was going to deliver the success or outcomes for our clients. There were cultural, designer to tech, time zone differences. It didn't work. However, since we've been able to normalize it and we've done the hard work to get those teams to gel, we did things like global gathering and bringing teams together, and friendships over the years have formed between people in these different continents and places. I'd like to think we are storming, and now the work that we're doing and the success we're driving for clients is phenomenal. And it's interesting because particularly over the last 4 years, people talked about, actually outsourcing maybe is the way to go and you're supposed to have a global. We've been doing this for years. So now for us, this is just like, look, guys, this isn't new to us. This is our standard operating mode.
So Ranzie, you hit upon a really interesting point there, that it does feel like more and more businesses are thinking, okay, maybe I can recruit from outside the UK. And if I do that, then I have access to a larger talent pool and potentially to talent that is a lower base cost to the business. If you're listening to this and you're thinking it would be good to get a bit more of a global talent pool in the business, what would be your top tips for them to get started with this?
So my top tips to get started would be at a leadership level, do think about why you're doing it and don't just focus on the cost savings. Ultimately think about how this is going to help scale your business over time, and think about not just the 1 or 2 people that you might get in the short term, but think about what the shape of your organization might look like. Having done that, focus on recruiting a good local leader. So somebody in that territory who you're going to be able to build your team around, because there'll be times of the day, there will be, kind of local issues that you're going to need to navigate, and you're going to want somebody on the ground who's going to be able to kind of help you with that. So try and find somebody on the team who you're like, well, actually, I could see this person coming on this journey with me, and they're going to help me scale locally in that region. And probably the most important one for me is treat everyone the same. Don't, again, I come back to culture. Don't say, they're the offshore guys. They're the guys that we ship all the work that no one else wants to do, or they're the guys who do all the kind of low cost stuff, or they're the guys who do all of that type of stuff. And then you start from the outset creating a sense of an A team and a B team or the C team or whatever it is. Our success has been driven that we're all just one team and everybody gets treated the same way. And it just so happens that we live in different places, but ultimately we celebrate the diversity that we have as a culture. And I think if you start with that way in mind, you'll recruit amazing talent, because there are some fantastic opportunities kind of hiring people internationally.
Ranzie, we talked quite a bit about running this global business, how you keep your remote team together, how you get over perhaps some of those cultural barriers. And all of this is all well and good and hopefully gets your team to be high performing. You need to point them in a direction, though. You need to align everyone to go in the same way. How do you bring in a vision and to get everyone going in that right direction?
We've been working on this for the last 2 or 3 years in terms of trying to really carve out who we are and who we want to be in the marketplace, beyond just saying, well, actually, we're a design and tech firm and we produce some great stuff for our clients. We as a team really want to be the agency, the company for what we call change makers who are looking to launch something brave. We want to be an organization which uses design and technology to help people launch ideas that focus on positive impact for the people or planet. That was our stake in the ground that we put in. Once you've done that, that immediately starts to look at, well, let's look at your clients and let's look at your practices and let's look at who you're working with, who can you work with, who can't you work with. And once you put that out there, you then need to act on it. So by saying that we want to work with organizations who leave a positive impact for people on the planet, that's not necessarily just saying that we only want to work with charities or not-for-profits, for example, but it essentially means that, that's our focus. So interestingly, since we started on this journey, we've won more museum clients and we've won more education clients and we've won more healthcare clients. Now, is it a case that's where we're looking and when those pitches come up, everybody doubles down and we go that extra mile on it? But we do find that our team are much, much, much more invested when we understand the impact on the world or the people that our work is going to have. So, for example, we won Kooth, which is a mental health provider, software provider for young people. And the whole team has been phenomenally engaged in that as a project and a platform because they can see. And when we have our briefings, we say, look, guys, if we get this right, think of the impact that we can have on the real world people. Same with Digital Museum of Learning, similar thing. So I guess the point is that firstly, we put a stake in the ground. Then we try and embed it in our briefings. But we also report on it once a quarter in our farmhouse firesides, which is where we get together as a team. And I say, well, actually, guys, these are who we're going after. Here's who we're winning. And that's how we're trying to basically transform our vision for who we want to be and who we're becoming into ways to embed it within our day-to-day.
You've got this set of values that you drive into what you're doing. You've got these routines and rituals to bring your team together, given that everyone's remote first and globally spread out. And then you take everyone in the same direction by having this strong vision that you do a lot of work to make sure that it's embedded into everything you're doing.
Yes, but it sounds easier when you say it like that. I mean, yes, that's effectively what we're trying to do. Do we always do it as well as I'd like? No. Is it a work in progress? Yes. But are we able to see the tangible impact of going on this journey and how it's changing the shape of our agency? Yes. Yeah, it's definitely something that we'll continue to refine and invest in over the next few years.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that and everything you've shared today. Let's look to the future. Tell me, what's next for Athlon? What does the future hold?
We're building a new team. We've got some really, really exciting talent coming on board, both in terms at a senior leadership level. So a new senior strategy people, client service people, a new VP of growth. So that's really exciting. It's exciting times for us there. We really want to double down growing, obviously here in Europe, but also in the US. We see that as a really exciting market for us, and that's something that we're going to continue to grow in. For us, again, it's winning more clients, positive impact on people on the planet. I think that we are not particularly well known as an agency, I would say, and that's something that we really want to work hard on over the next couple of years to build our identity and raise our profile as an agency. But ultimately, doing that through producing work which delivers positive results for people. And when I started at my first agency and speaking to the CEO at the time, he said to me, look, if you can bring together the best talent, that produces the best work. And if you're producing the best work, that will attract the best clients. And those clients will attract great talent. And I think that circle or cyclical nature is going to be our flywheel for success. If we keep doing that with the vision that we have, then I think we'll be all right.
Ranzie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so interesting to hear about your journey and how you've created this global business over the last 14 years. Thank you for sharing everything.
Brilliant. Thanks, Trent. Really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Human Powered, the podcast all about creating a high-performing agency or consultancy business. Thanks for tuning in.